Okay, I think we can start. Okay, so distinguished participants, dear guests, and colleagues, good morning. My name is Adam Shalimtzek. I'm head of the International Relations Division at the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Protection, and I'll be your MC for this event. I would like to warmly welcome you to this event on water reuse and to the Israeli Pavilion, which is actually the first Israeli pavilion at Climate COP ever. So we are very excited about this. We're very excited to have events in our pavilion. This event This event is co-hosted by the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Protection and the US Environmental Protection Agency, and is part of our ongoing cooperation with the EPA on water reuse. Today we are joined by some prominent speakers from Israel and from the US and from the World Bank. We have with us Ms. Tamar Zandberg, who is the Israeli Minister of Environmental Protection. We are very honored to have Mr. Michael S. Regan, Administrator of the US EPA. And we have Mr. Yechezkel Lifshitz, Head of the Israeli Water Authority, and Dr. Juan Pablo Bonilla, who is the Manager of Climate Change and Sustainable Development at IDB, at Inter-American Development Bank. The aim of the event is to share experience and expertise and to foster further collaboration on an exchange on water reuse globally and regionally. Following the remarks from our distinguished speakers, we hope to have a Q&A session, so please think of some good remarks or questions that we can share with our speakers or ask our speakers later on. I'm personally very excited about this event because we have been working very hard over the past 3 years to promote the water reuse cooperation with the US. I think that it's fair to say that water reuse is currently at the center of our bilateral environmental cooperation. During the last 3 years, we had several events on water reuse, and it's all part of our collaboration in the framework of the US Water Reuse Action Plan that I'm sure the Administrator will mention later on. So as you can see, there is actually an action title specifically mentioning Israel-US cooperation on water reuse, and we are very honored to have this as part of the RAP. You can see here some events that we have had over the past 3 years. It started back in 2019 at WEFTEC. You might see some familiar faces on these pictures on both sides. And we participated in a seminar, a webinar actually, because of COVID. Of course, we had to go virtually, as many others. And I think that the highlight so far has been the water reuse delegation visit to Israel that we had just last week. So I must say it was quite challenging to work on both projects at the same time, preparing for COP and having this delegation last week. It was supposed to happen a long time ago, but because of COVID, we had to postpone it a few times. So the trip was very successful, and this event today is another step in our very good cooperation. And as I just mentioned to the Administrator, we already had some excellent feedback from delegates from last week who are looking forward to the next steps in our cooperation. So I think I would just want to end this part and say thank you to all our partners in this collaboration, of course to the EPA and to the Water Reuse Association, the US GA, FDA on the US side, and to the Economic and Trade Mission at our embassy in Washington, who are our great partners in promoting this cooperation, and as well as to the Israeli Water Authority, also a leading partner in this initiative, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Agriculture, the Export Institute, and the water community, Water Edge IL on the Israeli side. And now, without further delay, I'm happy to present our first speaker of today, Ms. Tamar Zandberg, who is currently Israel's Minister of Environmental Protection. She entered her position as minister following many years in politics at the municipal level as well as at the national level as member of the Knesset. All through her political career, she has been very active on environmental issues. I know it's very close to her heart. And it was not surprising that she actually asked to become Minister of Environmental Protection, which is not very common in Israel, at least. As minister, she spearheaded many important processes and initiatives, including the adoption by the government of the Israeli climate law, a plan to improve environmental conditions among Israel's minority populations, and measures to protect the Red Sea against marine oil pollution, as well as projects on river rehabilitation and biodiversity initiatives. Minister Zandberg, maybe you could tell us a bit about the context of water reuse and climate change, and which opportunities exist for regional and international cooperation. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Adam. I like to stress the word is currently the minister, because you know that Israel had elections last week. So I'm actually celebrating my last days as minister, but this is also a good opportunity to reflect and see how much we have achieved and what is yet to be done. So my friend, Mr. Michael Regan, Administrator of the U.S. Environment Protection Agency, Mr. Yechezkel Lifshitz, Director of the Israeli Water Authority, Dr. Juan Pablo Bonilla, Manager of the Climate Change and Sustainable Development Sector of the Inter-American Development Bank, dear partners, colleagues, and friends. You know that in Israel, water has always been an issue. We have established the State of Israel almost 75 years ago, basically in the middle of the desert, and we have suffered water scarcity since the beginning of the country. And I think Thomas Edison said that necessity is the father of invention, so we had a necessity for water, and then we came up with the solutions. And now I'm very proud to say that nowadays Israel is we desalinate almost over 80% of our drinking water, and we reuse them. So desalination is very, very efficient because we are able to desalinate seawater, and then we reuse over something like 85% of the entire water market in Israel. So we actually desalinate and then use the water over and over again. And in the reality of facing climate change in our region, that is heating up faster than the global average, but basically we see that water scarcity and warming and drying is a phenomena very spread out in the world facing climate change. Just heard from Administrator Reagan how much some parts in the US are actually in face of scarcity of water. 2 days ago I heard from the president of Iraq, actually, that is a country that had the biggest rivers in the world streaming in it, that they are suffering from droughts and scarcity of water. So we see that in the face of climate change, our experience in Israel is becoming very much needed. And Israel is a small country, but using our technology, we see and we know that we can actually move the needle globally to help deal with the most stressing issues of climate change around the world. I'm very proud that our cooperation around water is, as Adam mentioned, in the last 3 years is in the heart of our really strategic relationship, or maybe I should say alliance, with the US. And that is true in general, but specifically in the field of water. And I'm very happy and proud that this is an issue Israel can actually contribute and make it a needed not only knowledge and experience, but also practical results on the ground. This comes to us in where we sit here in Egypt in a conference that stresses the issues of adaptation and implementation. And we hear many of the countries around here saying to us, you know, okay, commitments are, we have to be more ambitious, and that's fine, but we have to start implementing, and we have to start showing results on the ground. And Israel in this last year, in the last term of this government, we have been able to proceed a lot in the fields of adaptation and implementation. For example, just before coming here, our last government resolution, I think it was actually the last government assembly before the elections, we had a very important resolution that forces, or that it is mandatory for all ministries to develop climate adaptation plans within a year. So we expect that by the end of 2023, all ministries, not just the Ministry of Environmental Protection, will submit an adaptation plan. And up until now, about a third of our local authorities already have adaptation plans that the ministry, that the government funds. And we expect that by the end of 2024, we will have adaptation plans for all our local authorities. And this is also actually part of the climate law that Adam mentioned, that is not only in the climate law that passed through the first reading of the Knesset, and unfortunately we will not be able to complete it, but the climate law does not only commit Israel to its mitigation goals, but it also creates the architecture for adaptation plans and actually the Israeli mechanism to see that all sectors and all the ministries are on board in the way to adapt. You know, this is especially important here in our region that is already feeling climate hazards stronger and faster than the world. And we also invest not only in plans, but also in reality. We had a very dramatic government resolution of shading. I think you wanted to call it in the beginning the refrigerator, because it reduces the heating islands and the urban heating islands. And another thing that we are very proud of in terms of, I don't know if you can call it adaptation, maybe you can, is our educational plan. Starting from this year, since last September, every student, every pupil in school from kindergarten to graduation will learn about the climate change in accordance to age and capacity to grasp, and also in our informal education in the youth movements and organizations. So we are investing really a lot. We had a lot of side events here in our pavilion with the private sector, and we also encourage businesses and the private sector to come along, because as Administrator Reagan and I discussed earlier, you can see that climate change is not about only policy anymore. It's about the private sector, it's about the economy, it's about how an economy can compete and stay competitive in face of the changing reality in the world, and that is probably true twice as much after the last year of energy crisis and pricing crisis all over the world. So we come here to COP27 in a much different world than before COP26. But for some countries, this only stresses the importance of the need to change in face of the new reality. As Israel, we feel we are, in some fields, like water reuse, we are well positioned to take the lead, and now we see that we are also needed around the world. So we are very happy to share our knowledge in our region, here in the Middle East and worldwide, and I'm sure that the strategic alliance with the US will help us push our knowledge not only to the US itself, but also through the US to other parts of the world, being the US being such an important player all over. And personally, I feel that this is, an Israeli mission, and I'm very excited about the fact that Israel can take part in actually saving the world everywhere. So thank you, and have a successful event.
Thank you very much, Minister Sandberg, for setting the scene for us. There's no doubt that water reuse can be an effective solution in many regions suffering from water scarcity. I now want to turn to our second speaker, who I'm very honored to introduce. Michael S. Regan is the 16th Administrator of the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Prior to his nomination, Michael Regan served as the Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. As Secretary, he spearheaded the development and implementation of North Carolina's seminal plan to address climate change and transition the state to a clean energy economy. He also established North Carolina's first of its kind Environmental Justice and Equity Advisory Board. Previously, Minister Regan served as Associate Vice President of U.S. Climate and Energy and as Southeast Regional Director of the Environmental Defense Fund, where he convened energy companies, business leaders, environmental and industry groups, and elected officials to achieve pragmatic solutions to the climate crisis. Administrator Regan, I invite you to share with us the U.S. experience with water reuse action in a changing climate. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning to everyone. And Minister Sandberg, thank you so much for your leadership and your partnership. We know that the politics might have changed some situations in Israel, but we look forward to the continued relationship and partnership with you. To all of our guests here who are joining us at the Israel Pavilion and those streaming this event, we're excited to talk about how water reuse supports climate change adaptation.
American water utility operators, state regulators, private companies,
opportunity to interact with over 200 Israeli water technology providers, to visit cutting-edge water reclamation projects, treatment and research development sites, desalinization, recycling, and manufacturing plants, as well as agricultural. These individuals learned the story of how Israel came to reuse, as the minister mentioned, 87% of its water, and saw firsthand how it's actually been done on the ground. Needless to say, they returned home with lessons and collaborative relationships to develop and strengthen water reuse projects in drought-prone regions of our own country, furthering the water reuse story and the sustainability, security, and resilience of our own water supplies. Deals were made on the spot to purchase Israeli technology to initiate water sharing arrangements between selecting neighboring water utilities within the United States, and to extend our water reuse collaboration with our own agriculture sector. You know, this is a win for Israel, and it's also a win for the United States. And we're also looking into the possibilities of expanding our water reuse relationship in the Middle East and North Africa to further build capacity for water reuse and environmental protection and cooperation in the broader region. Water reuse is also a key climate adaptation tool that can be leveraged to combat flooding and drought. In the United States, arid western states have adapted or adopted water reuse as one tool to deal with droughts. The city of Los Angeles has set a target to recycle 100% of their wastewater for beneficial use by the year 2035. By reusing water locally, communities are realizing that they can also lower their overall energy demands and carbon footprint. By scaling up decentralized on-site water reuse in buildings, we can optimize efficiencies, which reduces overall building energy and water consumption, which also lowers the carbon emissions. EPA recognizes that water reuse can play a critical role in helping states, indigenous populations, and communities meet their future drinking water needs with a diversified portfolio of water sources. And to that end, EPA is helping communities build capacity and more diversified water portfolios to support climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. EPA not only supports the adoption of these innovative solutions, but is helping make them accessible by developing tools and partnerships through the National Water Reuse Action Plan, or RAP for short. I'm happy to share just a few examples of initiatives EPA has accomplished under RAP already. First, EPA is funding innovative research that supports energy recovery from water reuse under our Small Business Innovative Research Program. A recent awardee is seeking to capture the high energy content contained in concentrated brine strips, converting it to high-value on-site reuse products. This type of innovation helps to support lower-cost projects, which makes water reuse more accessible. EPA has also provided over $15 million in grants to support water reuse research and innovation. The Federal Emergency Management Agency and EPA plan to develop educational and training materials for hazard mitigation professionals to support drought mitigation projects as well. And to assist states and communities, EPA and partners analyze state-level reuse regulations and highlight infrastructure funding programs that support resiliency and water management. Since 1988, $153 billion in financial assistance has been provided to states for water quality projects. EPA's collaboration with Israel on water reuse is yet another activity under RAP, highlighting Israel's extensive infrastructure, regulatory, and institutional reform. And we're very excited about how our own regular discussions and now the RAP tour have created a knowledge-sharing partnership stemming from Israel's global leadership in applying recycled water for agricultural irrigation. Israel's participation in the RAP fosters an important information exchange on policy, technology, and agriculture to advance water reuse in the United States in a very, very meaningful way. And finally, water reuse is not just about water scarcity and preserving drinking water supplies, but across the United States, the capacity to incorporate water reuse as part of a community's water portfolio can also provide resilience against climate-induced impacts, as I mentioned, such as drought the ground. Coastal environmental restoration applications of water reuse can also be used to sustain and develop wetlands that create a buffer from storm surges and flooding to support our natural habitat. So integrated and collaborative water resource plan approaches, ones that include water reuse, enhance the ability to augment and improve the quality of existing water supplies and address the risks presented by climate change. These are just a few examples that we share with Israel, and we're excited again to be here to discuss and answer some questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Regan. And you mentioned again the wonderful visit we had last week by the delegates from the US. And I want to say that although the cooperation is led by our ministry and EPA, it has gotten some attention also from the White House, from the National Security Council in the US. And we can see that by doesn't work, but some of the press releases that have been after following previous meetings that were at the bilateral level. So again, thank you for this cooperation. Now I would like to introduce our third speaker of today, Mr. Yechezkel Lifshitz, Director of the Israeli Water Authority, who will present measures already implemented in Israel for many years to promote water reuse. Mr. Lifshitz has extensive experience in the Israeli water sector. During the last decade, he served as Deputy Director of Energy and Water Infrastructure at the Ministry of Energy, also responsible for water in Israel. And he was therefore also member of the Water Council. Later, he served as Director General of the Ministry of Water Resources. During his years of activity in the water sector, he promoted many projects, such as dealing with periods of drought and doubling the water desalination targets for 2030. Mr. Lifshitz, you have the floor, please.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Adam, for inviting me and to speak in this very important meeting. I was told I have only 7 minutes, and since we are in the Israeli pavilion, but in American time, I was told that my microphone will be shut off if I skip the 7 minutes that I have. So I'll speak fast and try to say as many as I can. So thank you very much for coming to this session. I have only a few slides about the Israeli water sector. We had the great visit of the EPA delegation, I think it was 2 weeks ago, right? Not last week. Last week, we met them. I met yesterday with Ms. Monica Medina, and she said that she was very impressed from the visit, and she met the delegation, and everyone was so happy from this visit. I think it was very fruitful, and we have to think of ways of cooperation between Israel and the United States. We just saw recently the problems in the water scarcity all over the world, from England to Spain to Italy to United States, California, and Florida, Australia, China. All the world suffers from water scarcity. I would say a few words about the Israeli water sector. This is actually a map of Israel, about 20,000 square kilometers. What we see is that we have a decrease in the water volumes. I always say, my colleagues from Israel already heard it so many times, but I always say we're not smarter than everyone, we're more experienced from everyone. Because Israel was suffering water scarcity since it was established in 1948, but even before. In the Bible we read that Abraham left Israel to Egypt because there was a drought in Israel, in the Holy Land. So we have a lot of experience unfortunately, on the one hand, but fortunately on the other hand, because it helped us to make our water sector to be as it is today. We have a decision to to almost double desalination in less than 10 years. I'll speak about it pretty soon. But you see here the amount of water that we have in the north part of Israel. We have about 800 to 1,000 millimeters in average of rain every year. In average means that in 1 year you can have a lot of rain, but on the year after you might have much less, 600 or 700 or even less. And in Israel we suffer once in a time of a few years of drought. We had a very severe drought between the years 2013, 2018, 5 years of drought, very severe period. And after that, we made a government decision to double the desalination and to find ways to enlarge the amount of water that we have. So our forecast for the coming years is that due to the climate change, we'll have less and less rain, especially in the Mediterranean. Of course, the population is growing, the needs are growing all the time. That's why we need to find sources of water for our needs. Okay, so this is the water supply, or actually the water demand in Israel. You can see that domestic sector uses about 40% of the water, and we have very strong agriculture sector, and you can see that about half of all the water uses goes for agriculture, but agriculture is combined from two main parts. The first one is potable water, and the second one is water reuse. We're using more and more treated sewage, treated wastewater for the agriculture. Actually, today we treat the sewage as another source of water, because without using the sewage for agriculture, we'll have to find sources for potable water for agriculture, but also we'll have to get rid of the sewage. Instead of putting it back into the sea or into the rivers, the lakes, etc., we are using something we want to get rid of as a source of water for agriculture. So what do we do with the sewage? First, we are transforming an obstacle to a resource. As I said, instead of trying to get rid of the sewage, wasting a lot of money to treat the sewage and to find ways to, let's say, put it back into the sea, or maybe put it in the lakes, or other things that happen all over the world, we are getting rid of the sewage and for agriculture. Actually, the sewage is another source of water. With that also, we are not polluting our lakes and rivers. In Israel, we don't have too many lakes. You know, it's a famous story about, I think, President Kennedy's wife, that she came to Israel and she wanted so much to see the Jordan River, the holy Jordan River that you read about it in the Bible. So they took her to the Jordan River. And Jordan River in Israel, it's not like the Potomac, for example. Actually, it can be a spring or a lake if you compare it to American standards. So she was very disappointed from the. Yeah, I mean, this is the river that we have in Israel. After we get rid of the sewage, or we take the sewage for agriculture, we maintain the health and, of course, the environment. We don't damage the environment. We see in different places in the world where the sewage, you have sewage in the streets or in the lakes. Let's say in India, for example, the rivers are polluted by the sewage. The Ganga is one big problem in India. They're trying to clean it and find it and use it for another source of water, but unfortunately it's polluted and they cannot use the water. Okay, this is, I'm sure that the people who visited Israel, I hope they visited the Shafdan. The Shafdan is a sewage treatment plant, the largest one in Israel. It takes all the sewage from the main part of the country, Tel Aviv and the region, and use it, of course, filters it, pump it into the ground using sand filtering, and then pump it and brings it to the southern part of Israel, to the Negev, and we use it for agriculture. The Negev actually is a desert. We have less than 100 millimeter a year in average in the Negev, and instead of being a desert like every desert we see all over the world. We use it as a place we grow vegetables and fruits, and it's been exported all over the world. So if you visit the Negev, it's very hot there. The ground is pretty dry, but with using the treated sewage in the Shafdan, we're taking it about 150 kilometers away to the south. We use it. The Negev is a very big place to grow the vegetables and the fruits for the Israeli population. If you visit Israel, I highly recommend visiting there. It's a little bit smelly, not too bad, but it's fascinating. And of course, it's growing up all the time because the population is growing. So we are enlarging this plant all the time in order to take care of all the sewage that we're having more and more. In Israel, we say we have the only thing that will grow in Israel, except for the economy, is the sewage. So that's why we need to build more and more sewage treatment plants and to use it for agriculture. And of course, to encourage the farmers to take the treated sewage instead of taking the potable water. This is another example of what we do with the sewage. You see these pools or this reservoir. We use it to save sewage for different months, but then we can use it also for photovoltaic panels. So in Israel there is legislation that helps us to use the surface of the water for producing renewable energy. So you can see here there are many aquifers, many reservoirs in Israel that are covered with solar panels. They earn money because they sell the energy to the grid. And of course, they can use the treated water, the treated sewage for agriculture. It helps them to reduce the costs and of course to earn more money for the farmers. So also we invest a lot of money in the sewage and in treating the sewage. You can see here the investments that we had in the last few years. But what's unique in Israel that everyone pays for the water, and I'm not sure there are many countries in the world that everyone, including industry, including domestic sector, farmers, actually everyone pays for every drop. Every drop in Israel is measured. If let's say you live in a house, you pay as much as you consume. We met yesterday with Ms. Medina and other countries. You pay certain amount of money every month, and you use as much water as you want. In Israel, the price, we have limited quota in a very low price for every household. But if you use more, you can use more and you can waste water, but you have to pay more for that. Since that it encourages people to save water. Actually, it's our mindset to save water. I gave yesterday an example. If you wash the dishes in Israel, you close the tap because you don't want to save water. When you brush your teeth, you close the water, you don't leave the tap open. It's actually, you grow up with this mindset. You grow up, the children are taught, are educated in preschool, elementary school, and everywhere they go to save water. So actually, in Israel, you cannot see a tap open, and it actually disturbs you. If you see a tap open, you just go and close it. We had a very good campaign that encouraged people to save money. It was very, very effective. So in Israel, every household has a quota of 3.5 cubic meters a month per person, and you pay about $2 for every cubic meter. And let's say you have a backyard, you have a swimming pool, you want to have a bath every day. You can do that, but the price goes almost doubles. You have to pay about $4 for every cubic meter. So we don't limit the population with using the water, but once you pay for the water, you are encouraged to save water. Also, the farmers pay for the water, either for the potable water or for the treated sewage. According to the treatment level, you pay more for the water. You can see here from the year 1998 to 2091, the last year. You can see in the okay. Oh, sorry. Is there a pointer here? I don't know. Yes. Okay. It's not. Don't see it on the screen. But you can see in the blue part, the lower part, you can see that the percentage of the potable water taken from natural resources is going down all the time. We're using less and less natural water, potable water from different sources, the Sea of Galilee or the aquifers or other drills. And we're using more and more, you can see in the yellow part of the graph, we are using more and more treated sewage for agriculture and for other uses also in the industry. And you can see what's in the upper part of the graph, you can see that we're using more and more desalination. As Ms. Minister mentioned before, in Israel we have 5 desalination plants. They produce about between 70 to 80% of the annual consumption of the domestic sector. All of the desalination plants are owned by the private sector. And the last desalination plant, it's going to start working next year. We're paying only 40 American cents for every cubic meter. And I'm sorry, not translating cubic meter to gallons. I visited the United States a few years ago, and it took us about 15 minutes to translate cubic meter to gallon. So 1 cubic meter is 1,000 liters. I don't know how many gallons. I'm sorry, I apologize. So you can see we're using less and less natural water, more and more desalination, and of course more and more treated sewage. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lifshitz, for this elaborative description of wastewater reuse in Israel. And I would like to give the floor to the last speaker of today. Dr. Juan Pablo Bonilla is the manager of the Inter-American Development Bank's Climate Change and Sustainable Development sector. Previously, he was Chief of Staff to the Executive Vice President of IDB. Dr. Bonilla has worked on environmental sustainability, climate change, and energy for more than 20 years. He led the IDB's Sustainable Energy and Climate Change Initiative, a major strategic step for integrating climate change and sustainability as a priority for the bank. In his country, Colombia, among other things, Dr. Bonilla launched new initiatives such as the National Climate Change Policy and the National Biotechnology Policy as principal advisor to the country's vice president. Dr. Bonilla also served as Deputy Minister of Environment and Acting Minister of Environment, Housing and Territorial Development. I want to mention that Israel and the IDB are now collaborating on connecting innovation with environmental protection and dealing with regional challenges posed by climate change. So maybe water reuse could be part of that collaboration. As part of this cooperation, 2 Israeli employees will start working at IDB in the near future. One in the bank's Amazon initiative, and the other will work on environmental activities vis-a-vis the private sector. Dr. Bonilla, the floor is yours to present opportunities for water reuse in international development projects, please.
Good morning, Minister, Administrator. It's a pleasure being here with you today. As Sarah mentioned, I was at the World Bank and I've been at the ADB for almost 17 years. But listening to you, when I was in my country, Colombia, Minister, I love what you said about need, scarcity leading to innovation. Because I was the president of the Regulatory Commission for Water and Sanitation in my country 20 years ago. And it was very hard to convince people to pay, not only for water, but for water protection, because we have a lot of water. So maybe we didn't see the need as a country to really protect and invest in that. But the change has been amazing in the last couple of years, because all the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and not only at the national level, I love to know your experience, Administrator in North Carolina, but at the state level, is increasing the awareness about the importance of water use, water reuse, and even at the city level. I was 3 weeks ago in Buenos Aires at the C40 meeting with the main mayors of all the world, and we talk about NDCs and adaptation plans, and water came all over. I'm seeing at the city level the 2 extremes. They just have a rain and they're getting flooded. The city where I grew up in Colombia, Cartagena, which is a beautiful city, was totally flooded 3 days ago, just rain. But then they go to the other extreme, totally floods. So they don't have the capacity of infrastructure to address to the flooding, but then they don't have water for human consumption. So is the kind of challenges that we're facing at the city level, at the rural level, at the infrastructure level. And that's why for a development bank, this is becoming a key issue to support not only our countries, our cities at the subnational level, but also the private sector. The IDB, for those that don't know, our bank is the oldest multilateral development bank, and is the most important development bank for Latin America and the Caribbean. The US is our main shareholder, and Israel is becoming a very important shareholder of the bank in terms of cooperation. So Adam, thank you for bringing that. And we created the Sustainable Development Department and Climate in 2016, after the Paris Agreement, the SDGs, and many other issues related to biodiversity, disaster, cities, with a territorial approach. So in the department, we have not only cities and urban development, rural development. We just created the unit for the Amazon, but I have in a transversal way the group for natural disasters, the climate division, the biodiversity and natural capital group, and also sustainable tourism. And we interact with the infrastructure department to advance the agenda on sustainable infrastructure. And with our social department to start seeing how cash transfers, for example, that they use for health, for education, can be used now for adaptation to climate. So we have a climate target of 30% of our total lending that is going up to 35. And it's very important what you mentioned, Administrator, about nature-based solutions and how we can also incorporate biodiversity and natural capital as part of adaptation, because we're going to start also adding that to our portfolio. And the idea is in the next 4 years to get to 40% of climate finance. Now, the goal is to have 50-50, mitigation and adaptation. And that's where I'm seeing water and water reuse becoming essential. Many of the loans that we're doing for agriculture are including efficiency of water, water reuse, and Minister, it's very important seeing the connection with productivity. For us, it was difficult to explain it only from the environmental view lens, but now everybody's seeing that reusing water and being effective of that is increasing productivity, so it's a good business as well. So it's the way also that the private sector of the bank, BidInvest, is bringing every day more water reuse as a key practice for agriculture. Cities, every loan that we're doing for cities and any NDC that we're supporting at the subnational level, water reuse is becoming fundamental. And in infrastructure, if you see many of our countries had a hydro base, they never thought 20 years ago that they were going to have lack of water for hydroelectric power. So even the concept of sustainable water management for hydro systems is becoming essential. But also the water division that is part of the infrastructure department with our department is developing a new approach for circular economy and the nexus of water, energy, agriculture, and cities to incorporate the water variable in everything we do. As part of the cities development, we have created the network of cities for Latin America and the Caribbean. We have about 200 cities. And all the mayors are asking about technologies, about what to do with water and wastewater treatment. So I learned a lot from the previous presentation about what we can do in that area. So for the future, as you mentioned, here we're talking about adaptation and resiliency. And we are going to need a lot of cooperation in terms of technology transfer. For all the different levels, I didn't mention tourism, but every time I'm visiting a country of the Caribbean, it's becoming essential, not only for tourism, but for the day-to-day in the Caribbean states. So when I hear about the cooperation that you have with the US, with all the states, and now that we're every day working more with Israel at the bank, as you mentioned, Adam, we're going to have one person working at the Amazon unit, and another person working in agriculture and technology at BidInvest, the private sector part, that I'm sure will bring the issue of sustainable water and water reuse to agriculture. I would love to explore with you in the future more cooperation to cities, to mayors, but also to not only agriculture, but also energy and different areas that are every day valuing more the use of sustainable water. Resiliency. Adam mentioned that, and you mentioned that a lot here at the COP. The more we advance from a natural disaster view to develop resiliency, the better. So I was explaining yesterday at the US Center, the IDB has developed not only contingency lines of credit for the ministers of finance for natural disasters, that has become a very innovative tool. For every country of the region, we have already 17 with the contingency lines. Our credit lines for the ministers of finance once a hurricane or a flooding happens, and they receive the money in less than a week. The good thing is that our lines that not compete with the envelope that the IDB has of lending with every country, and the ministers of finance doesn't have to pay any interest rate until the country uses it. And in addition to that, in the last year and a half, we created the hurricane clause. We already have Barbados and Bahamas using that clause in our contracts. They need to have the contingency line as a prerequisite, but then in any loan that we do, they have this clause, and if they get a hurricane or a flooding, the principal is postponed for 2 years. And BidInvest, the private sector, is doing the same for agriculture and other projects to have the climate resiliency clause and postpone payment for private sectors in case of flooding or drought. Why am I saying this? Because if we can include as part of the action plans after the contingency lines, water reuse, how to create resiliency, I think is the next step in the discussion that we're having here at the COP. It's not only adaptation, but it's how we build resiliency for the future, and what are the incentives that we're going to have for building resiliency. That includes building codes in the Caribbean, as you mentioned, coastal management, but the question is how we develop the incentives to include water reuse as part of resiliency, and as you mentioned, Administrator, and the use of nature-based solutions as part of building resiliency. So that is something that we don't have the answer yet, but that we are starting to think what are the tools as development banks to reward resiliency. One that I mentioned in the panel yesterday was to develop performance-based loans after countries build resiliency, and I think the reuse of water should be part of that equation. So anyways, just to let you know that for us as NDBs, adaptation and resiliency is becoming, I would say, as part of the DNA of the day-to-day work for MDBs. And I look forward to have an important cooperation with you, Administrator, in the US, but also with Israel Minister at the different sectors, but also at territorial level like cities that I think is going to be fundamental for the next years. So thank you for the invitation. A pleasure being here.
Thank you, Mr. Dr. Bonilla, for sharing an MDB's perspective on working with donors and private sector to promote water reuse. Now we have to deal not only with water scarcity but also with time scarcity, because we're nearing the end of this event. But I do want to see if we can have a short Q&A session. Maybe one question for each of our speakers. So please, our speakers, if you would like to take a seat on the stage, and we'll have a short session.
It's amazing to see the solar panels in the ponds. They stop methane too, or no? Sorry? They stop methane.
Okay, so I think there is a question here. Please present yourself before asking the question. Thank you.
Is this on? Yes? Hi, thank you all for your wonderful presentations. My name is Judy Zakreski, and I'm with the International Code Council based in the United States. We're an organization that facilitates the development of building codes that are used throughout the world. And my colleagues had the privilege of attending the mission to Israel last week and had a wonderful time. And Minister Zandberg, I'd like to extend their thanks. They asked me to thank you. It was just a wonderful experience. And my question is, so many comments resonated with me, but with political changes that we are facing in countries around the world, and being at COP, seeing all of the industry participation, it's clear that there's a huge role to be played by businesses and NGOs in helping the countries that are negotiating here to actually reach the nationally determined contributions that are being put on the table. Tech transfer, of course, the B2B transfer that you've all talked about is critical and essential. But there are a lot of players in the ecosystem, and I think that Dr. Bonilla addressed a lot of those. Thanks. Thank you for mentioning building codes. That's near and dear to our hearts. But I'm wondering if there's been thought put into this among all of your organizations about how we can facilitate better collaboration. Organizations like ours really do want to help to make sure that the technology that's available can be implemented within the regulatory infrastructure within every country, and also to build the capacity to actually implement and enforce regulations. And so it's sort of a complicated question, and maybe for all of you, how do you see all of these parties coming together, and what can we, as some of those parties, do to help advance the cause of resiliency and technology implementation?
Maybe I can give some examples that we have in Israel following your question. As I said, we have been focusing in the last year and towards this COP on cooperations in different levels. We've been actually thinking about how we can, as I mentioned in my presentation, share our knowledge in different ways. So, for example, next week we will be presenting here in this pavilion our, I think, unprecedented project of risk maps that we actually used weather prediction, very big computer that we put into use, and also mathematic models. Actually, one of the Israeli startups that are presenting here is helping us in predictions of the weather, and we can create maps in very good resolution to give predictions to not just municipalities, but actually neighborhoods and specific rivers, what is projected when there is an extreme weather event or a drought or floods, and then they can better reuse the resources to deal with it. For example, if you need a truck to pump the water, then when exactly you need to situate it and where. And we are, the event here is aimed at sharing that maps with the countries of the region and the world. For example, we have a platform called the Desert Tech that is our Director General here. It's an online platform for organizations, companies, businesses focused on desertification and arid and semi-arid adaptation that is open worldwide, and anybody can search it and join and see, the services and the companies that are offered there. So I think these are examples for voluntary platforms that are accessible and available for everybody, and through cooperations like between the US and Israel, we can better adapt them to a certain, let's say, country in Africa, for example, that wants to use some of those tools, and we can implement it there through our governmental and cooperation agencies, if that answers the question.
If I may add another short angle from the water authority angle, I'll give you an example. In Israel, we encourage the local authorities, actually the local companies that supply water to the local municipalities, to reduce their water losses. So we tell them, you must lose water in your municipality area, let's say until 7% or 8%. If you lose more water, non-revenue water in your area, you're losing money. If you're losing less water, let's say 5%, you'll earn money, you'll have a profit. And that helps the startup companies and other companies to go to these companies and tell them, we can help you reduce your non-revenue water. And there are some blow-mining Israeli companies, high-tech companies that help to reduce the water losses. There's a company that uses satellite pictures and other technologies to reduce water losses. So I think this helps the combination between actually the water sector and the technology.
Thank you. The gentleman here, please.
Thank you, sir. I'm Abdul Khalik Ayad. I'm a member of the Senate House in Egypt. I'm the head of the Energy and Climate Committee in the House of Senates. And well, actually, I don't have a question, but I just want to congratulate you, Your Excellency, and let me say, invite you for this achievement that I have just learned during this hour. Well, actually, when I asked myself what to start with in the learning of water efficiency, so I choose this place for one reason, that when you talk about what you are interested about water efficiency, then you have to go to the people where they have the greatest challenge for water. So that's what I did, and I've learned a lot, and I sure see that I'm a believer that my future, I'm 38 years old, and I believe that my long future is going to highly depend on quantum physics. So quantum is saying that we are all connected. How? I don't know. They say that we are waves. So we are connected. So I'm going to suggest that we have to have a cooperation with you privately, the private sector in your country, the private sector in our country, in water reuse, water efficiency. Does not necessarily means that if you are rich in something, that you don't have to care, or just have to forget the efficiency. Especially for people that are rich. Thank you very much.
Thank you for emphasizing the importance of collaboration and regional collaboration too. It is a must. Yes, we agree. We have time for one more question. Sorry, because our speakers have to leave, and I think the gentleman over there was first.
Thank you very much for the presentations. My name is Morten Østergaard. I'm the former Deputy Prime Minister of Denmark. Now I'm the Head of Climate with the Seabrain software company. It's the primary tech partner for the Danish environmental authorities. And as you may know, in Denmark we have safeguarded our groundwater resources to the extent that everybody has access to clean water from the tap. And that is due to very strict regulation and very fierce implementation. So my question, and particularly to you, Administrator Regan, is that I think it's apparent that the technology is there, the problem is very clear to everybody, so it's in the implementation. How can we speed up adaptation of the solutions? And as boring as it sounds, this is a government back office problem. The dissemination through the state revolving funds for clean water and drinking water. And the Danish EPA has a MOU with the California EPA. The US EPA just helped finance a report on administrative reform on administration of that. I think a desal project in California takes at least 5 permits from 5 different authorities. Right now you're discussing permitting reform in Washington, primarily by people who want to disregard the environment. Maybe it's time for a champion for permitting reform for the good of the environment. And my challenge to you would be, why don't you charge the State Water Board of California to work with the Danish EPA on, in 6 months, showing how they can shorten the lead time of desal projects with 50%. It's completely doable, no laws need to be changed, administrative back office reform and collaboration between agencies, and you have the power of your office to commission it.
Thank you. I hope I have half of the power you just gave me. Yeah, a lot of that does require congressional work. I think that to your point, we have done a lot under the Biden administration to look at how we do a whole of government approach so that we can expedite some aspects of permitting without sacrificing the public participation and shortcutting some of the rigor we have in our regulations to ensure that every single person in our country has access to good, clean drinking water. With the bipartisan infrastructure law and the $50 billion that EPA received to strengthen our water infrastructure and strengthen the quality of our drinking water, we've tried to streamline some of the processes there to ensure that clean drinking water is affordable and accessible to those actually who need it the most. We do see a lot of innovation in our state agencies like California, New York, even in North Carolina. I think you'll see a level of efficiency at the state level, quite frankly, that you don't see at the federal level for many of the reasons that you just articulated. So that sort of cooperative federalism model we think is working pretty well. And any time we have an opportunity to encourage states to develop relationships internationally, we would encourage that, just as we are trying to do that ourselves. So, so again, I think that your point is well taken. We do have a lot of resources now, thanks to the President's leadership with bill, bipartisan infrastructure law, and Inflation Reduction Act. The challenge is getting those resources out of the door and getting that permitting streamlined. And I think we have an incentive now because you have some dollars tied to that performance.
For coming here today. I think it was very enriching, and I hope you found it successful too. So thanks again for joining us here in person or virtually, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have some ideas for further cooperation. Thank you all.